50-inch wide knit that I'm going to use for the skirt, and I'm going to do a little gathering stitch in it. You could do this two ways. You could cut this in half down the fold and make a seam here. I'm not going to. I'm just going to have one seam, this seam over here, and that's it. So I've marked exactly in half for my pattern so that when I do a gathering stitch along here, I know this is one side seam, this is going to be sewn together as my other side seam. You could, instead of gathering it, you could do pleats. You could make little pleats like this for your skirt if you wanted to, and have a pleated skirt on the t-shirt if you wanted. I'm going to do gathers, just it's simple and easy. This is my little t-shirt. Now there's another decision we have to make, and that's how the distribution from shirt to skirt. This shirt is a 10-12, no, yeah, a 10-12, and I'm just going to tell you it's short, it's kind of short. So on a kid who would wear normally a 10-12, this is going to kind of hit at the top of the hip line just below the waist, so it's a little bit on the short side. So if you think about that, and then this is the skirt and the shirt are almost the same length. Right now, I'm going to cut off of my shirt about 2 inches. I'm going to line this up with my mat. I need to get a new mat. This mat's seen better days. But if I line this edge up along here and I cut, I'll get exactly 2 inches off. And that's what I'm going to attach the skirt to. So this will be the length of my bodice, and then the skirt will be added to it. So it'll be almost exactly half top, half skirt. On an adult, that's not the most flattering thing. On a kid, it doesn't matter as much. If I were making this for myself, I would either have to do a shorter skirt or a longer skirt for the bodice. I tend to do a shorter bodice and a longer skirt. It just makes your legs look longer. So I'm going to start by cutting off 2 inches. And you can mark this, like I could just show you. I've got my 2 inches lined up. You can take your ruler and do that so you have a nice line to follow. We can get our 2 inches off. And now I don't have to worry about this. Now I'm just going to double check because this is a manufactured shirt, and seldom are they perfectly precise, and you can see it's just off a tiny bit on that side. So I'm going to just even that out so we don't have one side. It's only 1/4 inch, but now they're nice and even. So now I have my little bodice and my little skirt, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the sewing machine and run a gathering stitch. And I'm going to do gathers only in the center part. I'm going to have it kind of flat on the sides. You could gather it all the way around. It's kind of up to you. You get to choose how you want. Okay, we're going to start with a basting stitch. This is not a stitch that's going to stay or be seen in the garment, so the color of the thread does not matter so much, and sometimes I actually prefer a color that is easy to see, so like an opposing color. So I'm going to just start by dividing out my fabric. So I know I'm going to lose, this is the selvage edge, and I'm going to completely lose that when I serge that off. So let's mark real quick. That's what's going to get lost there. Here's my other side seam. So I'm going to line these up with each other to get the centers, front and center back of my skirt. So here's one. It's going to be exactly the same on both sides. Here's the other. All right, so now I have marked side seam, center front, center back. So this is going to help me know when I'm gathering, this is what the center of my little garment, what I'm gathering to. And I'm going to set my machine for a long stitch. So I'm going to go to 4.5, 4.5. Here's my side seam. This green one is a center. It could be center front or center back. And I'm only going to be gathering around this. So I'm going to kind of pull the gathers in like this, and it's going to be straight on each end. I think that's what I want to do. We'll see how it looks when I put it. Actually, look, we can just do a quick tester. So slide this under here. So if this is my skirt, It'll be kind of straight there, little gathers here, straight there. Yep, that's what I think I want, especially for a child that's older, this 10-12 size. So I'm going to now mark how much I need to pull in. So let's say I'm going to leave about 3 inches on each side of the seam, front and back, at least, that aren't gathered. So I'm going to mark that. So here's my side seam. Here's the 3 inches I don't want gathered. Here's my side seam. Easy to see over here because I have selvage edge. The 3 inches I don't want gathered. Okay, so now I'm going to just sew 2 long stitches. The first one's going to be at 1/4 inch. Whoops. Here's my side seam. This is where I'm going to start, 3 inches in. And I'm going to just straight stitch. No back stitching. We're going to use this for gathering, so we're just going to stitch at the 1/4 inch. Probably should have put my straight stitch foot on for this. And you can see it's already pulling it up a little bit. That's what that nice long stitch does. And I don't want to pull up my centers. Oof. So I'm watching. I don't want to hit it. I always pull them out, but in this case, I need that marking. There's line 1. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to move down 1/4 inch. So I'm going to line up my old stitching line with the inside of this foot. It depends on your machine how you'll line it up. That's how I'm going to line this one up. And do it again. Because we're sewing with knit, you don't want to pull or stretch when you're doing this. You want to let the machine do the work. We're just guiding. Okay. So here's how the gather stitch looks. See, there's 2 lines. And we're going to take, I often, when I do gathering, I will have the bobbin a different color than the top on purpose. And that's because the bobbin thread, as a rule, is looser than the top thread. So I'm going to grab my 2 light colored bobbin threads, and when I pull, they're a little tight. Can you see how nicely that gathers up? If you only do one layer, you're not going to get this nice even stitch. 2 layers of gather stitches is always better. I have a smocking machine, which is my favorite way to do gathers. I just load up a couple threads on it. And so from this side, this is one side seam, I'm going to gather till I get to the pin, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other. I'm just pulling it tight now. We can loosen it up when we get it to the shirt to get the sizing right. So that's how it's going to look. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. And then I'm going to go to the back side of the skirt and do the same thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull this up so you can see it. See how it just slowly gathers up. Now I'm using knit on knit. You could do cotton. You could easily do a cute cotton and add it to the t-shirt. So there, look, there's my gathers. There's my lack of gathers. Isn't that cute? Okay, so now I'm going to do the exact same thing to the back. Measure my 3 inches over and gather, and I'll show you when I've got all of it gathered up. I have gathers. I have my gathering in the front done. The back I have the stitching, but I haven't gathered yet. And before I go any farther, I'm going to take my little cute t-shirt, and a lot of t-shirts like this that you buy don't have side seams. See, it's just a tube of fabric. Do you see that? But we need to quarter it. So with it laying flat, it's easy to mark its side seams. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to put little pins for my side seams, and this is going to help me line up my skirt later. Now, if you have only a sewing machine and not a serger, when I go to the serger here in a minute, what I do with the serger, you'll just do with a zigzag on your regular sewing machine. All right, so there's my 2 side seams. And if we fold it in half, this is going to be my center front and my center back. Now I'm going to pin it, but I want to only pin through one layer. I don't want to pin them together. So here's one layer. And then I can lay it on top and get the second layer. Now the other way you could do it is open it up, line up your side seams and get your front and your back. So you can do it either way. So now I have sides, center front, center back. I'm going to go ahead and pull my gather stitches for the skirt back towards my center pin. And again, the bobbin is usually the looser, easier to pull. Whenever you do a basting stitch, you want to use a long stitch, don't back stitch. And you kind of have to hang on to your fabric a little bit when you're doing a basting stitch like this. If it were really lightweight, this is a pretty heavy knit. If I were using a really lightweight knit or a lightweight fabric that I was doing gathers on, because of the long stitch, it'll actually start gathering ahead of time for you, and that can cause problems because it actually may not pull nicely when you're wanting to adjust your gathers. So it's easiest if you keep your fabric flat. So now I have my gathers for the center back and center front. Here's my side seam. And now I'm going to go ahead and sew my side seam, the one actual side seam I'm going to have. And this, if you're sewing in a tube like this, this could be a side seam or it could be a center back seam. You could do it either way. I'm going to just put it on the side. It's the least noticeable place on the body. If you're doing this on a sewing machine, can you see, and I know it's going to be hard because I have so many lights in here that are going to be backlighting this, but this is the selvage edge. So you want to stitch on the other side of the selvage edge and cut the selvage off, or cut the selvage off first and then stitch it. You only need a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This is knit, it doesn't fray, especially t-shirt knit. If you're doing this with a cotton, then you'll want to straight stitch and zigzag next to it, do a French seam, a mock French seam, something like that on a sewing machine, or do your straight stitch and your serge stitch, or do a 4-thread serge stitch. Lots of options. We just want our garment to stay together and look professional. So I'm going to serge this really quick on my serger, and I'll be right back. So now I have a serged side seam. This is how it looks. That's how it looks on the inside. And then I went ahead and serged my hemline too, just so that it'll look pretty, so that when I go to turn it up. Now at this point, if you want to, you could go ahead and turn up and hem. I'm just going to do a straight stitch hem on this. It's nice and full, so don't have to worry about the threads popping too much. So you could go ahead and hem it at this point, or you can attach it. That's sort of up to you. I'm going to attach the two first and hem second. That's my personal choice. So I'm going to now switch out the threads on my sewing machine to gray so that it matches, because right now I have lavender and white, which is what I use for pulling my gathers. So next we're going to marry the two pieces to each other. So I'm going to take a center front of my garment and a center, it doesn't matter if they're identical front or back here, they're the same. And I'm just going to put those two pins on top of each other and pin it. Now what's going to end up happening now, I'm pinning right side to right side, so this is the wrong side of my t-shirt. And what's going to end up happening is this is all going to go to the inside of the t-shirt. So I'm going to just flip this around for a minute. So we have this hole like this, and we're matching up things. So this is my first piece I've done. Next is a side seam to side seam. So here's the underarm. Here's my side seam. And this is going to fit almost perfectly just the way I've gathered it without even trying. I love it. So now we're going to pin those to each other. And now I'm going to do the same thing. Here's a side seam. This is my side seam. So now, look, it's getting all put together already. And now I have a center and a center. Put those together. So now I'm ready to even out my gathers so that I don't want to pull or stretch. I just want it to be nice and flat. So I'm going to even my gathers out like this. Put some pins in to make sure it stays. And you want to make sure it's flat and smooth. So you don't want the skirt longer or the shirt longer. They need to be the same length when you're done. If you need to, you can adjust your gathers. You just want to make sure they stay nice and even. You want nice, even looking gathers. I'm actually going to turn off my machine for a minute there. That will probably make it easier for you to see. All right, so I've got my side seam, no gathers, my center front gathers. Here's the other side seam. Keeping it even, not stretching, just making it straight. Want to keep our lines together. Now I'm doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance on this. Put in a pin. All right, so there's one side pinned. I'm going to do the same thing to the back, and then I'm going to go to my sewing machine and do a straight stitch and go to the serger and serge that edge, and it's completed other than the hem. A few hints when you're sewing your gathering together. Number one, you just did basting, so double check your machine and make sure you set it back to a regular stitch length, which would be 3.5 or less. I'm going to about 3.1. Here's the other little hint. You can sew with the gathers on the top or the bottom. I like to sew with my gathers on top because I can see that I'm regulating them, that I'm not getting a fold over and pinning down a fold over, that sort of thing. I'm also starting on my side seam. Now there's lots of extra threads. They may be hard to see in the camera, but I've got my basting thread still here hanging out. I've got my side seam threads. So you just want to keep those out of the way. You don't want them getting caught in the machine. I'm sewing at a 1/2 inch seam allowance because 1/2 inch is where this bottom stitch line is for my gathering. And I will be stitching right over that, right on top of that stitching line where I gathered. And that will hide the stitch, the gathering stitch, but it will also make sure that I don't get fold overs and that I get a nice, even, pretty stitching line. I don't know how this is going to show up on the camera, but I'm lined up exactly. So here's my 1/2 inch. I'm now hitting the basting stitch, and I'm just keeping everything flat. We don't want a pleat created where a gather was. We want it to always look gathered. You can kind of pull flat down on your gathers to help keep them flat. Make sure our edges all line up. We're just going around the circle. Now, I don't know if you can see this in the camera, but see my my toe is kind of hitting the gather. Sink your needle, lift up your foot. Whoops, don't lift your needle when you do it. And straighten it back out. Now, because we're all kind of stuck at home and not getting out and going places like the fabric store, I am sewing up my stash. This is a t-shirt I have had in my stash since my daughters danced in elementary or junior high. Like, this is a really old t-shirt, and they're both getting ready to graduate college this semester. So just sewing up using scraps. As I was working on this, I thought, how cute would it be if these were like little concert t-shirts, or maybe their favorite character t-shirt, and you could add a little skirt to it. If you're using the cottons, you can buy the licensed cottons, and like, let's say you had a Disney princess, you can go buy that Disney princess fabric and make a Disney princess dress out of the t-shirt really easy. I've been sewing on this project for about 15 minutes, and look at where we are. It's done other than the hem. So this is how it looks. And of course I'll take pictures in a minute, but there it is. A nice little gathered dress. So now we're just going to do the hem, and we're done. And for the hem, we're going to just turn up a 1/2 inch all the way around, maybe 5/8. I'll do a 1/2 inch stitch with a 5/8 inch turn up and straight stitch it. So let me get that pinned and you'll see it finished. All right, as I finish pinning this, normally when I make videos, I'm home alone, or it's me and my teenage son, and he's I'm in the basement and he's up on the top floor, you know, 2 ahead of me. He's up on the 2nd story doing his homework or his artwork or whatever. And so the house is nice and quiet. Usually the only thing you'll hear is the dog barking at a squirrel. But we're all home, or most of us. My husband, one of my daughters, my son and I. And it's noisy, so I'm afraid you're going to be able to hear in the background my husband walking upstairs and talking because he's doing all of his business. So just warning you, this may be a little bit different of a video. You're going to hear a lot more background noise. Hopefully not. I haven't tested it out, but I can hear it sitting here. It's loud upstairs. All right, so real quick, here's my cute little dress with the gathers. And now I'm going to, I've just regular straight stitching this. This is a nice full hem. It doesn't have any pulls. If this were a different part of the garment, a neckline or something, we couldn't do it this way. So I've turned up 5/8 and I'm going to stitch on the half mark. And you could do a double line of stitching. A lot of times you'll see this double row of stitching. That's actually done with a special machine. But if you like the look of the double row, you just do 2 lines of stitching a 1/4 inch apart. This first one is at the 1/2 inch mark, and then this is about a 3/4 of an inch mark. So that's sort of up to you. I'm just going to do 1 row of top stitching, I think, for the hem, and we will have a completed garment. Here's just a close-up of the hem that I just did, front and back. So there's the hem. Here's the gathers on the outside. And let me flip it to the inside to show you. Now I haven't cleaned up any of my stitching yet, so that's what it looks like on the inside. Now you could leave it just like this, but I'm going to go ahead and serge this edge, and then I'll show you how that looks. All right, this is how it looks serged. Stitched. I didn't take out my basting stitches, I just left them in there. They might work their way out at some point, but that's it. Okay, I'm going to show you the finished product. All right, here's the finished garment. This is a child's 10-12 on an adult dress form, so it's a little tight across the top, but you can see how quickly we made in about a 1/2 hour. We turned a t-shirt into a dress with a piece of scrap fabric. I used a 1/2 yard of leftover knit. You could have used a cute cotton woven also. If you're doing this for an adult, I would probably, depending on if you want a short skirt or a long skirt, you might need more than 1/2 yard.